Hello and welcome to the short introduction to the AMJ Management Research Canvas. My name is Marc Gruber, and together with my colleagues Dorobantu, Davide, Ravasi and Wellman, we're going to explain the canvas to you in this video. A canvas-based approach has proven to be useful in domains where innovative activities have to be conceptualized and mapped out, just like the conceptualization of a new research project.
At the very center of the canvas sits the puzzle. The puzzle refers to very big and broad management questions that are of interest to large communities of scholars and managers around the world. The puzzle drives the research project, but it's too big to be answered in any single research paper. So on top of the puzzle sits the research question, which is more narrowly and more precisely defined so that it can be answered by one particular research paper that can be published in one of the management journals. Both the puzzle and the research question are of interest to a particular audience, and it's really important for authors to define and to understand or to identify their particular audience. The audience are the scholars who are most likely to be at a conference, at a workshop, to provide feedback on a working paper, or to read the final publication. They are similarly interested in the research puzzle and the research question and have most likely contributed their own research to understanding and resolving the puzzle. So in addition to thinking about the audience, authors should consider prior research and think about prior research as the foundations, as existing studies that provide the foundations on which they build their own work.
The next element of the canvas is the theoretical framework. Think of the theoretical framework as the answer to your research question. And in quantitative research, adopting a deductive approach, these answer will drive your study, usually in the form of hypotheses to be tested. In qualitative research, this answer will emerge from your study instead. Either way, it is important to specify the what, the how, and the why, the core construct that constitutes your theoretical framework, how they interrelate with one another, and why do you expect them to interrelate that way, the justification to your hypothesis or the theoretical mechanisms driving your process model in qualitative research. Next, you need to explain your methodology. First, your research setting. Where are you going to explore your research question? Is it an experimental study? Who are your subjects? Is it a field study? In which organization, industry, occupation are you going to explore your research question? What makes this setting particularly appropriate to explore this question? And then, of course, your research design. What data are you going to use? How are you going to analyze those data? How will you know the answer to your question?
I'm going to explain the final three sections of the management research canvas. And these are the sections that you would not be able to complete generally until you've collected your data. So once you've collected your data, the next piece of the canvas is explaining the empirical findings that have emerged from the data. And this would be patterns and themes within the data that pertain to or help you address your research question. With respect to quantitative research, it's important to talk about both statistical and practical significance of the patterns that you've emerged. And for qualitative research, it's important to talk about the major themes that emerged in the data. Then you would move towards the next section of the canvas, which is discussing the contributions of your study. And here we'd like to move beyond simply reporting the findings towards discussing how those findings move us theoretically forward in terms of the conversation that you're contributing to. Also important to think through how those findings pertain to practicing managers. So one problem sometimes is that authors stop with the theoretical contributions and they don't explain how organizations or people within organizations could put those findings into practice. And then the final piece of any paper that we mentioned in the canvas is discussing the boundary conditions and limitations of the study. So this would involve discussing under which conditions we would expect our pattern of results to replicate, which contextual features might change, potentially, the results, and then what are the limitations of your study, and how could future research build on or address those limitations.
We have developed and designed the AMJ Management Research Canvas so that management scholars can use it at different stages of the empirical research process. To conceptualize an empirical research project, to develop the draft of a manuscript, to revise and polish it in preparation for submission, and to continue to revise it in response to feedback. We do not intend it to be a rigid template, only a tool that provides guidance on how to develop and later present the 9 core elements of an empirical research project. We wish you good luck for your studies.